The Washington Commanders have a possible Hall of Fame tight end, and they had league's best blocking tight end. But do they have the best tight ends in the NFC East? We've got your rankings right here on Ref the District. Let's go. Greetings and salutations, and welcome to Ref the District. I'm Nathan Perry. That's the Stoner, and we have the continuation of your NFC East position rankings, this time up the tight ends. We've done QBs, running backs, wide receivers. If you haven't checked that out, make sure you head over to the channel and check those out as well to see where the teams are stacking up here in the NFC East. As I mentioned, it is tight end time. So if you like your tight ends, make sure you hit that like button for us. Make sure you're subbed up. Make sure you're sharing this video with other people so they can join the conversation. Then join us on Wednesdays live at 7:30 Eastern. So that way you can continue the conversation live with us as we have our flagship program. Stoner, tight ends is a position both of us really like.
Yeah.
But might be one of the most misunderstood positions in the game of football and nuanced positions, as Ben Sinnott still third on the depth chart. You know, it's going to take some time. Logan Paulson from the team, we've talked with him about the tight end development and how it just takes a little bit because you got so much going on. You got blocking, you got the routes, you got not just pass blocking, but then run blocking. It takes some time. So maybe Ben Sinnott, not a big deal for us right now, but maybe later he takes one of those top tight end spots.
Yeah, a lot of people want to just look at tight ends and say, hey, tight ends, you should come right out of the draft and just become this stud tight end. And it really doesn't work that way. It's historical in looking at the tight ends and how long it takes them to develop. And when you look at the tight ends in the NFC East, Nathan, what's really interesting, of all the top tight ends, and really you just kind of look at the top two. In our case, we'll look at the top three just because we know Sinnott so well, right? But if you look at all of them, they are all developmental tight ends that it took time for them or is in the process of taking time. Philadelphia has two. They drafted both, not early. Dallas, their two, drafted both, not early. And again, same with the Giants. Drafted them both and still developing them. And in Washington's case, they're the only ones that have something different, with Zach Ertz, of course, coming in and doing what he did last year. So it's exactly what you said, Nathan. It's a little bit of a nuanced position that takes time for these guys to develop into what you hope that they can be. That's what we're hoping with Sinnott. But right now, we just have to focus on these top two and hope that they can do exactly what they did last year. It'll be interesting to see where you have them ranked, where the Washington tight ends compared to where I have them ranked.
It is going to be interesting. We're going to save some of that Ben Sinnott conversation for Wednesday. So like I said, check us out and join the conversation on Wednesday to see where we feel about Ben Sinnott in this tight end room and how we can continue to see him develop. Because you're right, the Brock Bowers and even the Kyle Pitts, his rookie year, he had 1,000 yards. You don't see that very often from, the receiver or tight ends, even receiving tight ends. And even the Travis Kelce's took a little bit before they became the Travis Kelce's of the world. Sam Laporta is another kind of anomaly when it talks about coming out the gates really strong. So again, we'll have that conversation on Wednesday. Let's get to the rankings right now as I see them and see whether or not Stoner agrees with me. Last on the list, as they've been, I think, every single time so far in the position rankings, the New York Giants. This is the position groups we looked at, the wide receiver group and even the QBs. We talked about how top to bottom of the league, the NFC East had probably some of the best rooms. I do not feel that way about the tight ends. The tight ends here in the Giants roster right now, Chris Manhertz, Daniel Bellinger, and Theo Johnson. And Theo Johnson, the picture here right now, but he didn't even see as many snaps as some of the other, tight ends that we have, but he's kind of their developmental piece. He's very athletic, so he's supposed to be a receiving tight end, but just hasn't really put things together right now for the New York Giants.
I saw Theo Johnson up close when we went to the Giants game up in New York, and I believe he scored a touchdown in that game. And I think it was his only touchdown of the year, by the way. But he looks like he could develop into something, but that's not where he is right now. And like you said, man, the Giants have been last in everything. Did they do anything this offseason to improve this offense? And obviously they've made changes, but have they done enough to get out of the bottom of the NFC East, which is where they finished last year? I don't know, but these tight ends for the Giants, they're definitely, with Bellinger and Johnson, they're the top two guys. It is always hard to figure out when it comes to this position, tight ends and, of course, wide receivers. They don't have a whole lot of control over whether or not they get the ball, right? They depend on somebody to give them the numbers that they need. And last year with the Giants QB play, obviously it wasn't up to par and what you expect from an NFL standard for an offense. So these two guys just don't have numbers, but they are both draft picks. They're both young, Bellinger and Theo Johnson, so there is some upside to both of them. But right now, Nathan, I'm with you. They are 4th in the NFC East. They're not anybody that you're going to sit down and game plan for at this point.
Yeah,
Theo Johnson could develop, but not right now.
He did only play 12 games last year, starting 11 of those, 331 yards receiving. And yes, that was his only touchdown all year long. So again, not really the room when you're talking about relying. It's not just the poor QB play that they have to rely on, but it's also the offense play calling. And normally what's kind of funny is tight ends and running backs tend to be the best friend of a QB that's struggling and or an offense that's struggling, because you're going to do a lot of checkdowns. Wasn't really the case out there with the Giants. Theo Johnson not getting a lot of action there. So we'll see where they rank at the end of the year, but going into the year, definitely bottom of the NFC East. The next one, I thought this was going to be closer, but it really wasn't for me. The Dallas Cowboys coming in at 3rd. Their list here includes Luke Schoonmaker, or Schoonmaker, depending on how you want it, Jake Ferguson, and Brevin Spann-Ford. Probably a name that most people probably aren't really familiar with. Ferguson and Schoonmaker being Schoonmaker. What do you want to go with?
I think it's Schoonmaker.
There we go. We're going to go with Schoonmaker.
Yeah, there you go.
You can definitely tell which part of Germany I grew up and lived in when the CH sound is not the, it's the sh.
Yeah.
So anywho, dialect aside, Schoonmaker here, really kind of being the guy with Jake Ferguson. Ferguson obviously being the one who is used most of the time out here. These again are guys who developmentally they're young. They're just not quite to the level of what you would be fearing or being like having to game plan for.
It's interesting that you have Dallas in the 3rd spot. Now, for any Cowboys fans who come in and watch this, that guy put him in 3rd. This guy actually had them, wait for it, Nathan, had him number 1 in the NFC East.
Really?
I like these two guys. I think in comparison to the others in the NFC East, I think these are two very good tight ends. And like you said, they're young. I think Ferguson is only in his 4th year and Schoonmaker's only in his 3rd year. These are younger tight ends who are developing. And last year, I mean, Ferguson had 59 catches for over 400 yards. And if you think about 2023, he had, I believe, 71 catches.
71 catches, 700 yards. Yeah, 761 yards.
And 5 touchdowns in 2023 with a healthy Dak Prescott. And last year, of course, they went through most of the year without Dak, and that certainly hindered him from putting up the numbers. But I thought in 2023, he was excellent, and he was poised to get the Pro Bowl. Better. Yeah, he was poised to get better. But, of course, they had the quarterback problems. And surprising, like you said, Nathan, usually a tight end is a struggling offense's best friend. It didn't seem to happen that way. But, I mean, combined between the two of them, you're talking about 80-some catches between the two of them and almost 700 yards. So I like these two in Dallas. This is probably the only time that Dallas, for me, is going to finish on top in the NFC East in the position rankings. But I've got them number 1, Nathan, believe it or not.
That is absolutely crazy. I just don't see, like we mentioned, they're young. coming into fourth season for Ferguson, as you mentioned, and Schoonmaker coming into his third season. 27 catches, 241 yards, and a touchdown for Schoonmaker. Not, I mean, that's just okay. Moving, that's not really, the good year for a tight end. 50, nearly 60 catches, one shy of 60 catches for nearly 500 yards is actually a good tight end year. That's not, that's, making no doubt about it. It is like your middle of the pack, top end. They don't make a lot of receiving yards. In fact, I'm looking at the list right now. There are 3 with 1,000, and then several in the 800s. But like those are your top tier: Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, Travis Kelce, George Kittle. You got Jonnu Smith, who was at 800 yards. That's your top tier, right? So nearly 500 yards is pretty good, but it's still kind of tier 3 for me.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I like Jake Ferguson, but I definitely thought that these guys, because we haven't seen the consistency from Ferguson, he had the one really good year and then he had an okay year. His rookie year, 174 yards, 22 targets, 19 catches. But it's just like, I would need to see more from them. So maybe at the end of the year, Stoner, I can agree with you if Jake Ferguson breaks out. But right now, not seeing it, going to put them as our third team in the NFC East.
Keep an eye on Jake Ferguson this year, for sure, with Dak, presuming that Dak is healthy, and with CD and Pickens on the outside, occupying a lot of those linebackers, helping out on the outside, then I think he's going to get a lot more touches than definitely in 2024, more than 2024.
Well, the room we're most interested in right now is actually coming in second. The Washington Commanders unable to unseat the Philadelphia Eagles, who are at the one spot for me. I'm going to assume that this was ranked 3 for you. You weren't very pleased with the Washington Commanders room. We know them very well. Zach Ertz had a fantastic resurgent year. He had kind of been out of the, not really used in the league the last few years, since 2021. A lot of injuries, a lot of stuff going on. Only 7 games in Arizona last year, 27 catches for 187 yards. That was last year. This year he finishes with 66 catches, 654 yards, 7 touchdowns. A lot of key moments, as Washington fans will remember. And he's got a long history of being successful, as we know, in Philadelphia and winning a ring, Pro Bowl years, potentially a Hall of Famer, depending on how things shake. He's kind of on that cusp, the Hall of very good at the very minimum for him. I'm concerned there might be a drop off the year. Okay, the age is a question, but going into the year, if he can replicate what he did last year, Washington definitely has the second best room for me. You also have John Bates, which I know as a receiver, not the most exciting, but as a blocking tight end, he is considered probably the best blocking tight end in the NFL, which I think has some merits and it's nice in use. And then you have their developmental guy in Senate. So that's where I feel like this. Maybe a little burgundy and gold glasses, Stoner. Talk me out of it.
No, I'm with you. I actually had them second as well. I had them over Philadelphia's tandem as well. Because if you look at anybody who coming into the 2025 season of all the tight ends in the NFC East, Zach Ertz was and should be the best tight end in the league, in the NFC East, in the division, right? He's a top tier tight end. There's a lot of ifs. We had those same ifs last year before the 2024 season. Health, production. Can he do what he had done 5 years ago when he was in Philadelphia? But he did. He exceeded all of those expectations. He played in all 17 games, and including the 3 playoff games. He played in 20 games and had 66 catches, 7 touchdowns. 7 touchdowns is what Terry McLaurin used to do. That was Terry McLaurin's career high before this past year. And Zach Ertz did that in the one season here in Washington. So he had a fantastic year. In fact, he was so good that he stymied the development of Ben Sinnott, right? We all thought Ben Sinnott was going to be a guy who's going to be out there a whole lot more, and they were counting on him. But Zach Ertz just wouldn't let him get any snaps because he was so good. And his hands are so good. All those throws that he had to make, that Jaden Daniels had to make low and inside, that only Zach Ertz would catch, Zach Ertz caught him.
72% of catches, by the way. That's his catch percentage. Pretty good.
That's pretty darn good. So I put Zach Ertz as the best in this group within the division, but I did have Dallas, their tandem, I think is a little bit better because John Bates, like you said, he's not a pass catching tight end, but we don't know enough about what Jake Ferguson and Schoonmaker and all these other guys do in terms of blocking, how great of a blocker they are. Yeah. So that's all we have really with John Bates is we know how good of a blocker he is, and he was rewarded for that with a 3-year deal. You don't see that very often with tight ends who had 8 catches in an entire season get a 3-year contract from a team. Don't forget this. He's a Ron Rivera draft pick.
Yeah.
He's not an Adam Peters, Dan Quinn draft pick. So they love John Bates for what he does. And as I've said for the last 3 years, Nathan, change his number to 78 and put him on the end of the line. And I think he'd be an excellent right tackle. But he's got good hands. He doesn't have great feet. He's got good hands.
Yeah, his catch percentage is in the 60s, which again is pretty good. As you see a lot of tight ends, especially in like the 50% range, whatever that might be reason for it. But he is effective as a receiver, not used a lot. Like I said, only targeted 13 times, 8 catches for 84 yards. For your top tight ends, that's a game. Like that's one game, and he did that in 17 games. So not quite a receiving threat. I do think that he's underutilized, and I hate that word utilized, but I'm going to use it here because he's shown some savviness. He's not fast, but he knows where to be. But I think the offense isn't calling on him to be the move tight end, as they're called. He's not a receiving tight end for them. He's just kind of this back outlet, which has been used to Washington's favor before, where they're able to sneak him out there and they're like, oh, it's John Bates. He must be blocking, so we're not going to worry about him. And he leaks out and he gets a catch. But really, they're boistered. This group is boistered by the fact that you do have Zach Ertz, and he did have a fantastic year last year. Now, someone who didn't have one, which may be a surprise that they ended up on top of the rankings, was Dallas Goedert. Didn't have that good of a year. In fact, he's actually had a couple of down years, large in part due to injury, but he did put up several good years before this, and he still put up a solid 42 catches, 496 yards on an 80% catch rate. So like he is very good. Maybe disappointing if you're using him in fantasy football because he only played 10 games, and theirs aren't very good scoring games, only 2 touchdowns on the year. But he is very reliable. And then their developmental guy is Calcaterra, someone I'm familiar with. He was at OU, moved to SMU, but he did play 17 games, started 13 of those, 298 yards with 24 catches. This tandem to me, I'm putting at the top. It's not a huge gap for me, but I do think Dallas Goedert, still in the prime of his career. He just hit, he's just 30 years old. He'll turn 31 by the end of this upcoming season. So if he can stay healthy, this is a guy who's going to be a top 5, top 10 tight end in the league. Philadelphia's rough though, because they got 2 great pass catchers, right? They got 2 great wide receivers on the outside, but Dallas Goedert is somebody game in, game out you can't just ignore.
Yeah, I had Philadelphia 3rd, Nathan, in the NFC East. And maybe this is just me tired of constantly putting Philadelphia 1 in all of our rankings. Maybe that's kind of burned into my brain a little bit and it's influencing me. But I know he's a good tight end. Dallas Goedert is a good tight end. And you'd love to have Dallas Goedert on your team. I don't know. I'm just not a Dallas Goedert guy. Look, it's not an anti-Philly thing. I'll tell you, if you've watched any of our shows, the way Philadelphia is put together, I'm jealous. I'm jealous of their offensive line. I'm jealous of their front office and so on and so forth. But for some reason, their tight ends just don't do it for me. He's probably put a spanking on Washington plenty of times throughout the years. As you said, this is year 8 that he's going into. So he's played Washington presumably 15 or so times, somewhere around there. But he's just not somebody for me when I watch that I'm worried about, that I'm scared of. I'm scared of A.J. Brown and Saquon Barkley and Devontae Smith and all of that. But Dallas Goedert, just not one of those guys who puts the fear into me as a defensive coach when I look at it. So maybe there's a little bit of this and a little bit of that of why I have them down in this ranking, but I just don't have them very high.
Where would you rank Dallas Goedert and the tight ends for the NFC East? Where would you put them?
I would probably put him third.
Yeah, behind probably Zach Ertz and Jake Ferguson. Is that where you?
That's where I'd have him. That's probably not fair. That's maybe a little bit of recency bias because I do like Jake Ferguson a lot, especially I think he's only in his 4th year this year and he's kind of on the rise. Although he did have a little bit of a down year compared to the previous year, but I still think that he's got a long way to go. I think we've seen Dallas Goedert, what Dallas Goedert is, and as high as he can go. And it's good, but it's not great. And it's not something
800 yards is nothing to be ashamed of. The whole Philadelphia offense didn't have a whole lot of passing yards last year. And 800 yards, I just want to clarify before you get to the keyboard and in the comment section there. That was several years ago that he got 800. Saying that was his peak. Right?
Yeah.
Peak was 800 yards. That's a good year, a really good year for a tight end. I do wonder, again, at the end of the year, and I think we should do this at the end of the year, to see where these positions line up. Because I could absolutely see Philadelphia dropping if Calcaterra doesn't develop. Goddard has just another kind of middle of the pack year. But it also matters, where does Zach Ertz do? Like, does he drop back to reality? Does old man Winter finally take over on that one? And Jake Ferguson, like you said, exploding onto the scene. If he can back up that really good year that he had, maybe they would jump to the top of the rankings. But I think we're all very down on the Giants. I don't think anyone's expecting Theo Johnson and the Giants to jump up. But these are my rankings. As Stoner mentioned, he has it differently. He has Dallas, then Washington, the Eagles, and the Giants are his rankings. You let us know where you have your rankings. Where do they fit? Which tight end were we disrespecting, and which tight end should we be on the lookout for? Let us know in the comment section. Then make sure you join us on Wednesday, live, 7:30 Eastern. Join the conversation where we will bring this up again, talk about our tight end room and how Ben Sinnott could potentially crack the code, or whether or not we expect Zach Ertz to repeat a fantastic year here in DC. So make sure you join us there. I'm Nathan. That's the Stoner. And until next time.
Is Zach Ertz potentially a Hall of Famer?
Be a fan.